Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Joyce Gomez, and I am an associate professor in the Department of Literacy and Reading Education at California State University, Fullerton. Thanks so much for joining me today. Today, we're going to be talking about hands-on phonics fun. So ways that we can foster students' knowledge and development in the area of phonics. We're working toward the following learning goals. First, to examine the process of emergent literacy and also to explore approaches to fostering students' development of phonics knowledge. So to begin, let's talk a little bit more about the process of reading and where phonics instruction is situated in that broader picture. So when we think about reading and literacy, that of course includes this foundation that consists of oral language development. Now, this can be in a variety of languages. So when the child is immersed in that home language or home languages, they're receiving all of this language, and over time, they also begin to express that language, right? They start to develop it and engage in that co-construction of meaning with those around them, those in their environment. So that's where they develop vocabulary. They're building off of those listening and speaking skills. And it's really setting the foundation for their learning. So over time, they get to also understand some of those patterns of language. And here's where we start to see their phonological awareness. This is where kids can detect rhyme. They can hear the sounds in language. So if we're thinking about the context of, for instance, US English, we're thinking about the different sounds that letters make, but also the unique sounds that combinations of letters can make. And so kids can hear those sounds, detect them, and over time even manipulate them to play with sound. So if I asked a child, for instance, to change cat to another word by switching out that initial sound. So if they were to substitute the k in cat to what would that make? They would we would encourage them to develop the ability to determine that would change to hat, right? So kids can start to, again, detect and manipulate all of these sounds. And over time, we want them to also be able to make the connection between the sound that these letters and letter combinations are making and the text that they're seeing on a page or on a billboard or in their community. And so that's taking us into that phonics knowledge where they're able to see the words on, for instance, a page, and they're able to follow these rules or these patterns to put those sounds together and to recognize words that are part of their lexicon, that are part of their vocabulary. And over time, students start to decode or, sound out those words much more fluently. And so we are seeing them build that reading fluency as they really start to independently access the text on a page. And that, of course, still working in conjunction with that vocabulary development, because, of course, now that they're reading more books, they're introduced to more vocabulary. And so they continue to build that. And as they talk about what they read, they continue to build that as well. And all of this is setting the foundation for stronger and stronger comprehension, which of course can happen throughout this reading process, right? Because as they're being read to, or as they're exploring illustrations in a book, they can still, of course, share their thinking around books. So that comprehension is continually fostered. But now, as they start to read these books independently, they can also engage with books in that way. So if we look at the graphic here, we could think about these foundational elements of reading as the big five. That phonemic awareness is that development of, again, those sounds and recognition of those sounds, rather, and that leads into more and more work with phonics. So we tend to see the groundwork for this in pre-K, those really early ages and grades. And those are skills that are typically targeted and fostered in those early grades up until possibly first or second grade. And the idea is to get kids to have those strategies to access new texts or new words in text by the time they get to third, fourth grade, and excuse me, beyond. That way, they're using reading to learn about new content. So what we want to do today is talk more about this decoding process. How can we use the decoding process, or how can we use phonics instruction to continue to build students' ability to decode new and unfamiliar words? So decoding really consists of helping children break the code in the reading process. So today we're going to talk about what that looks like in the context of English with our 26 letters of the alphabet, but the codes, of course, also exist in different languages, as we can see illustrated here. So no matter what language our children are developing in relation to reading, it consists of actively and explicitly helping students see, understand, and independently utilizing those codes to access the meaning behind that text. And so an important process in this instruction is assessment. Assessment will help us have a better understanding of what students already know and what areas of need they might have to help us target that instruction. And as we can see in terms of phonics, there's a broad range or a broad scope and sequence that begins with students' ability to identify letter names and letter sounds, and then also to be able to detect the sounds that vowels make, both short and long, as well as different consonants, and then these combinations of these letters, as we'll see here with digraphs, which consists of these two letters that make a unique sound. So for instance, not only do kids need to know that S makes the sound S and H makes the sound P, but together S and H make the sound sh, right? So through phonics instruction, we're helping students understand these unique patterns and rules. So there are a variety of phonics assessments available. These include both paper pencil based kind of traditional formal assessments, as well as just like hands-on assessments that allow us to make observations of students' thinking. So here you see a snapshot from the core phonics survey where you can see that students are asked to identify the names and the sounds of letters, and it goes on to showcase some of the other phonics patterns that we saw in the chart previously displayed here. As they go through parts A, B, C, and so forth, we see a progression of difficulty. This is a copy of the teacher record form where the teacher is noting what letters or sounds the student might need some more help in. In this case, you could see that the child is switching B and D and Q and P, which is quite normal. But as the student progresses towards some of these other parts, you can see where students are mastering the ideas and where they need a little more help. So in that sense, you can, if we go back to the previous chart, say, okay, this child has a pretty good idea, has a pretty strong understanding of the letters and the sounds in the alphabet, but I noticed that they start to have some difficulty when they're asked to decode words that have long vowel sounds, like the long A in the word bake, right? And so using that assessment can help us see what area of that scope and sequence we want to target, which will allow us to really fine-tune the types of words we're inviting students to help us decode or construct in these different exercises or games or activities. So again, our work in phonics instruction really begins with assessment. because that helps us really get a sense of how we're going to develop the most appropriate scaffolds. And so as you can see here, manipulatives or hands-on materials can also serve as a way for us to understand students' knowledge. So if, we want to use a paper-based assessment, such as a core phonics survey, we can, display the student sheet, which looks a little different than this teacher record, and ask them to read those words. But we can also, of course, use less formal processes such as these such as like letter tiles or these magnetic letters to invite them to do similar work. So depending on the age of the student and how they're responding to these assessment processes, we can use a variety of pathways to just gain more insight to where they are and what next steps we want to take to help foster their learning. So let's say that we have a child that's just starting to learn the letters of the alphabet and the sounds that they make. We definitely want to begin there. We want students to have a strong foundation in letter knowledge. That doesn't necessarily mean that students have to 100% always know all 26 letter names and sounds, both uppercase and lowercase, in order to progress to these other areas, such as inviting them to decode CVC words or consonant vowel consonant words such as cat or pop, but continually revisiting these letter names and sounds that they don't know will be an important way to help them be ready to decode new words, especially as they encounter letters that they may not be familiar with. So they need to know those in order to be able to successfully decode new words as they continue to move forward in that scope and sequence. So there are a variety of hands-on ways that we can do this work. That includes, of course, immersing students in literature and games that provide them fun opportunities to revisit and master these letter names and sounds. So Dr. Seuss's ABC book is displayed here, but there are a wide variety of alphabet books. And importantly, you want to pick a book that's fun and engaging for that child. So if you see that the ABC books that you're utilizing don't necessarily reflect that child's interests and community and funds of knowledge, you can always co-construct an alphabet book with the child or with the class. So one thing you can do, for instance, is invite the children in the class to bring items that represent a particular letter name or sound. Take photos of some of those items and make your own class book. Again, by showcasing some of those materials from their households or from their communities that are personally relevant to them, you're going to increase the likelihood that they're going to really develop that strong knowledge and familiarity with these new letters. You're developing those strong memories around those experiences. And so that's a great way for you to, again, help students master some of that content. Other great tools include music, videos, and then other materials that allow students to consistently engage with these letters, such as letter bingo, as you see here, or alphabet puzzles. Alphabet arcs and other types of games or activities are also helpful in that they allow students to, again, consistently engage with some of this material. This is a great center that you can set up in a classroom, among others. So it allows students to explore and to play and to really find unique ways to engage with the content that are fun and relevant to them personally. So just know that there are tons of tools that you can include in your teacher toolbox But some important principles in selecting these tools would be including items that have lots of visuals, that have hands-on opportunities, and allow the student to play and to interact with the content. So I have a couple other examples here of alphabet strategies that you can utilize to help students, continue to explore and engage with this content. So here in the illustrations, we see a variety of activities, including fishing for letters. So here you would write the letter on a little fish, and you create a little fishing pole or rod that allows the child to pick up different fishies. So you could connect magnets to the fish and to the fishing rod here. And so when the child catches a fish, you're going to invite them to note the letter that's displayed on that particular fish. We also see here some fun marker activities where the child has to find particular letters in a word scramble, or they're also using those markers to practice making the shape of a letter. So talking about the unique lines or curves or circles that you see within that letter, and then extending that to more tactile experiences, as we see here with the Play-Doh, so the child can see the letter. We talk about the shape, they make the shape themselves, they feel the shape by forming those letters using the Play-Doh. And then as you can see here on this worksheet, they're also writing the letter with the marker. So providing students with multiple opportunities to engage with, to represent, and to see, to experience these letter names and sounds are great ways to reinforce some of these concepts. And here in this video, we'll also see some Play-Doh fun where the child is, again, interacting with the letters. What'd you make? What'd you make? T. B. B. I did it. You did it. So when we think about reading development, there are a variety of phases that students will work through as they continue to build their knowledge. When we think about the pre-alphabetic phase, children tend to read words based on visual versus alphabetic features. So they're starting to recognize the different shapes and patterns within some of these words. And so in this way, students might actually recognize words on sight. So here you can see they'll notice the connection between the stop sign, like visually, its shape and color, and the meaning behind that, which means like every time they see their family member's car come across the stop sign, it'll stop. Kind of similarly, kids who recognize the golden arches in the McDonald's sign will know like, time to eat, here we are. So it's a very early visual connection. Partial alphabetic phases include children learning letter sound correspondence, and they start to make some of these partial connections. So here we'll see students maybe start to recognize certain words, but based on either that first letter that they see or the last letter that they see. So this is a helpful stage in that, students start to actually see and recognize these individual letter names, maybe not all of them. But as they continue to move forward, you might start to see kids guess a word based on that first letter or that last letter. So they might mistake two words that happen to maybe even share the same initial and ending letters and sounds, because they're still relying on that. So at the next stage, the full alphabetic phase, we want to encourage students to stop and really look at each of the individual letters within a word, or some of the couplings of those, like S and H, as we talked about earlier, and allow them to really make thoughtful connections between those codes that they're learning and the word that they're engaging with at that moment. Because ultimately, we want students to make it toward that consolidated alphabetic phase where children are starting to connect larger units or letter patterns to spoken forms of words and their meanings. Like they're actually recognizing these unique patterns. They're putting together these letter names and sounds to effectively and accurately access the correct words, and relatedly the meaning behind those words too, right? So if they can also recognize unique patterns like CH or EST in a quick way, that will of course increase the fluency with which they're decoding these new words. And so over time, we want them to develop that automaticity, the same way that we as more expert readers are able to read words on a page quite quickly. That of course is what also helps us or causes us to overlook maybe spelling errors on a draft of a paper that we've written, right? Because our eyes are already reading the text on a page so quickly, so expertly. And that's where we want our students to get, where they are progressing from a point where they're actively working to sound out each letter or each phonics pattern to the point where they're able to read words on sight. But notice we do the same thing even as expert readers. When we come across a word that's unfamiliar to us, we pause and we start to analyze and deconstruct that word, right? If you see a word in a textbook or in a medical journal or bigger article, we have to stop and see, okay, what patterns do I recognize? You got to put those sounds together and say, okay, I understand this base word, I understand the suffix, and you start to draw from your background knowledge to then make sense of this new word. So those strategies are still very much an active part of what we do as good readers. So we're setting that foundation for our young children here. An environmental print can play an important role in that early process. As I mentioned earlier, young children will recognize those golden arches or other symbols that they see posted around their household or their community, whether that's like the food packaging that they start to recognize, as you can see here with our Kellogg's Fruit Loops, or the signs that they see, whether that's a sign that pertains to driving, like the stop sign, or the signs they see in shops or restaurants like Target. And these environmental print connections help students to understand that these symbols have meaning. These symbols in our environment communicate messages. And so in that sense, they make the connection that reading and literacy is about co-constructing meaning. It's about sharing messages with those in our community. And in this way, we're illuminating the purpose of text. I also want to take a moment to talk about some of those irregular words. So when we think about phonics instruction, where we're asking kids to identify and put together these unique sounds in a word, we're asking them to follow and understand and apply those patterns. But we also have to explicitly teach children that there are words that don't follow those rules. And if we can provide them with that knowledge and that language and the tools to master those words as well, then we can work to avoid their confusion and frustration and empower them to also attack those words when they see them on a page. So sight words are any words that students or adults will know upon sight. And high frequency words are those words that are most often seen in English text. So here we see listed Fry's first 100 words. And so as you can see, when we look at words such as, let's see, of, of and the, they're not following some of those rules we just talked about, right? And so we still see these words quite often in text. So by sharing this information with students and letting them know, okay, we're going to practice our sight words today, whether that's through flashcards or through games or through other activities, we're empowering students to also engage with those words when they see them in text. We just want to clarify that there's certain words that, gosh darn it, don't follow these rules that we're talking about. But now let's transition back to this discussion of phonics, these regular words that do follow the rules. So phonics refers to teaching practices that emphasize how spellings are related to speech sounds in systematic ways. So we're illuminating these letter sound relationships that allow the reader to tap into this knowledge and to decode these unknown words. And so why are these important? These are important so that students have those tools for success. They're able to recognize the code and use the code to access new text, and then, of course, the meaning behind that text. So we want to give them some concrete rules that they can follow that help them move beyond just that, that scaffold feedback of sound it out, just sound it out. Like we want to give them the most explicit targeted feedback possible, such as helping them understand, for instance, the distinction between vowels and consonants, and helping them see what rules apply in particular words. So here we can see the different consonant phonemes and graphemes. So those phonemes, going back to the phonological awareness concept we talked about earlier, those are those unique sounds. So our consonants make unique sounds. And graphemes are the written patterns. So when we see them in text. So we want students to be able to recognize these and to be able to apply these rules when they see them in written form, to then see the connection between the sounds that they make. So for instance, when we think about the letter J makes the sound J, but so can the letter G, and so can a combination of D, G, E, and so can the combination of G, E. So we see a couple examples listed here. So helping children understand that these rules exist, and when we see them in a new word, they can highlight them, identify them, and then apply them to that process of sounding out this new and unfamiliar word. Similarly, we can help students understand what a vowel might include, but two, the different sounds that they can make based on how they're situated in a word. So for instance, vowels can make short sounds like the a in apple or ant, or even in its medial sound, cat, right? But when we see an a that is coupled with what I like to call the magical E, can change the rules a bit. So if I see the word snake, I know as a good reader that that E is going to make the A say its name. So it's no longer going to say snack. That E makes the A say A. So when I'm sounding out the letters in snake, I'm making those sounds snake, snake. So that changes things a bit. So by helping children understand how all these rules apply to words, we can give them the tools to work through unfamiliar words and text. There are also special vowel rules that exist, such as vowel digraphs or teams. This is when two vowels are placed together and they make one sound. So here we can see a couple examples of what that looks like and how that's translated to unique words. Similarly, we have some other rules such as diphthongs. That's when two vowels together in a word produce a single glided sound, as in the examples you see listed here, as well as Y rules. So there's so many rules, and we want to be able to help students learn about these and apply these. But we also want it to be fun and meaningful. So here you just see one example of what a weekly lesson plan with phonics can look like. As you can see, instruction should be explicit and targeted and connected, right? So it doesn't have to be a 1 hour lesson. We can really break a lesson or an experience up into little chunks throughout the week. But as you can see in the example here, everything's connected. So depending on which of these patterns we want to focus on, we can start to develop activities that we can revisit Monday through Friday. And importantly, we want to make that connection to text as well. So in addition to doing some hands-on activities with like slates or magnetic letters or letter tiles or sorting activities, we also want to give kids an opportunity to see these patterns in the books that they're reading. So we can select books in a very intentional way, such as, here we can see Hop on Pop. We see different examples where students are engaging with word families, or in this case, CVC words that reflect similar patterns. That way we can invite students to identify some of these focal phonics patterns that we're addressing, and then we can help them through other words that they might need some more support with as we read together. So we definitely want to help kids make these connections as they engage in authentic text. But there are a variety of phonics instructional strategies that can be very fun and very engaging. So we just want to make sure we fill up that teacher toolbox to develop a coherent and engaging plan that really meets the needs of that unique learner or that unique group of learners, if say we're doing this in a small group or in a whole class setting. So let's talk a little bit about some of these phonics resources we can utilize. There are a number of online resources that we can draw from. Starfall.com includes tons of online games. Videos can also be really powerful, as we see in this video here. So let's just take a look just a second.
Happy, cheesy, happy, happy, cheesy, 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 happy, happy, cheese. I love sounds like whoop. And even, let's look at this sound. This sound has two letters, S and H. We all know that S says S and H says. When we put them together, S-H say, just kidding. S and H say, shh.
So as you can see, this video really is a child-centered, friendly visual that gives our children some more insight to some of these rules, so that when they see, in this case, SH in text, they can tap into some of those memories with the videos and apply some of those rules. But again, we also want to give them those hands-on experiences. So here you see a couple different tools that you can draw from, including notebooks, plastic eggs, these like wheel activities that allow students to consistently engage with these rules in a fun, hands-on way. You can also draw from manipulatives that help make the connection between those patterns and illustrations or pictures. As you can see here, the child is putting together the letters or sounds in cake while also seeing a picture of cake. Can you make the sounds in your word?
Hey.
What are the sounds?
A.
Put them together. So here, we can offer that student feedback and reinforcements. You can ask them to share what the magical E is making the A do, in this case, making it say its name. Or you can allow students to play with these independently and in small groups or in centers so that they can engage in that exploration as well. So we can also draw from word matching or word swords or decodable books and other tools to work toward these goals. Word families are those words that have those unique patterns and allow us to, one, identify words that rhyme, but also, two, allow us to expand our vocabulary quite quickly. So for instance, if we can help our students understand that when they see ASH that says ash, then we can help them recognize a variety of words that reflect that pattern. Or in this case, if we're looking at the word wash, the unique sound osh, and how that can make different words. So similarly here, when they know that AT makes at, they not only have the tools to read at, but they have the tools to read cat, hat, bat, sat, and rat if they have mastered those letter names and sounds in that initial slot here. So word families are a great way to also expand students' knowledge of phonics patterns. And so other hands-on activities that we can draw from include Play-Doh activities. In this case, we can see that the child is putting together these different sounds and word wheels and slates, where we ask kids to either construct these words or create them by writing them. So there's multiple modes that we can invite students to engage with phonics knowledge. So multimodal approaches are really important and powerful as they help tap into students' unique strengths and interests when helping them engage with this content. So here I'm also going to show a quick erase activity where students can either quickly erase elements of a word on a slate, or in this case with the Play-Doh. Okay, so what word do we have here?
Dizzy.
Dizzy. And how would we change dizzy to fizzy, like a fizzy soda pop?
I just have to change the D to an F.
Okay. So here in this case, we're changing the initial sound in a word. So we're doing a quick change. So we could also do this.
Right,
awesome. We changed dizzy to fizzy. So you can go ahead and do the same thing with other words, especially words in a word family with, again, it could be that initial sound, but you can also do this by inviting students to manipulate the ending sound or the medial sound. And it's just a quick, if they were writing this word on a slate, it'd be a quick erase, like they could use their little fingers to erase one of the sounds and to replace it with the new sound and to see what new word they've created. Decodable texts are also really helpful tools in that they allow students to focus on that unique pattern. So you can invite students to evaluate the decodable text booklets as they reflect where students are in that scope and sequence. And again, it allows students to really focus and narrow in on those codes. So as you can see here with Sam and the SAP, you can see that children are focusing on that short A sound in that medial position. So decodable texts are really great in that they allow students to get lots of practice with those patterns, but you don't want decodable text to be a substitute for more authentic text, such as the Dr. Seuss books that we showcased earlier, or other books that might also happen to have lots of great phonics patterns reflected, but that also have lots of great characters and a well-developed plot, right? They're super engaging. So we want to make sure we expose to students to a variety of text throughout the day. But decodable text used specifically to help students with decoding can be really helpful, and that it can foster that independence and success and confidence. Because as students continue to practice reading these books, they see that they start to become more masterful at recognizing and decoding and reading these words with fluency. So what you can do is begin by inviting students to preview the text with you. You can ask them to highlight that focus or focal phonics pattern. So you can ask them to find, for instance, all the words that have the sh sound in them, and remind them about those rules as they go ahead and start to read the book independently or with you. Again, you don't want to rely on decodable text as your broader literature tool in the classroom throughout the broader day, but they could be a great way for you to preview the text together, to talk about those rules together, and to encourage the student to continue to practice and to build their fluency and independence. So again, phonics knowledge can really help students access new text, can really empower them to become those strong readers that they'll all certainly become, and to help them feel really confident in their reading abilities. We just want to help them see and understand and apply those rules. So thank you so much for listening. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. Take care. Bye-bye.